Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I feel like we're at the Eurovision Song Contest or something. Hello, Australia. This is Vienna. So this is Shadi Abou-Zahra speaking to you today about accessibility conformance testing. It's a great pleasure to be with you again, even though just virtually. I do miss travel and I do miss many of the Australian friends who are in the audience virtually today. So, as we said, the accessibility conformance testing really is a project that has been due for so many years to try to look at how can we improve uh, the interpretation of the web content accessibility guidelines that is implemented in different testing tools, but also testing methodologies. Let me back up a little. We have many different types of evaluation tools. We have a list at W3C that meanwhile has over 150 tools, actually right now 157. I think that number has actually even exceeded since the recording of this video. So it's continually going up. And this is a good thing because we need different types of tools. We need tools that address designers that help them, I don't know, check colors and select colors and so on. We need tools that are more focused on, let's say, front-end developers that can help do certain checks in the browser while people are rendering things, but also things that are checking the code while we're creating the JavaScript and the programming and so on. And then there are enterprise type tools that checks, the entire website or many thousands of pages and do different kinds of testing. And we know that automated testing alone is not sufficient and that there's manual testing that needs to happen. Also, in these manual testing methodologies, there are certain interpretations encoded. So what is the consistency among all of these? And I think those of you who are a bit more experienced in accessibility testing will know that it's sometimes quite severe, right? We do have very small differences that do lead to quite substantial results at the end, meaning that if you do one methodology or have it tested by one person, you can get a result, and have it tested by another person or using another methodology, you get a different results. And that's a really confusing situation for accessibility because it just adds more overhead, it adds more time. We need to deal with this confusion. We have these endless discussions about what's right or what's wrong. Um, and some of these bugs or inconsistencies, there's really a wide spectrum of reasons why this happens. To some degree, and I'll take here some blame on behalf of W3C, there are things that are not well defined in the web content accessibility guidelines. Oh my God, did I just say that publicly? Okay, it just stays as a secret between us, okay? I never said this publicly. No, seriously. One of the examples that really struck me was something like the requirement on keyboards 211 that there are no keyboard traps, that things can be operated by keyboard, and then later on requirements that there are no keyboard traps. Now, WCAG, for example, uses the phrase standard keys, but it doesn't really define them. So one of the issues is that somebody might interpret, let's say, the escape key as one of the standard keys, others might not, or the arrow keys or certain combinations. Is Control X part of the standard keys? Is it not? So you get these kinds of inconsistencies that are part of needing additional definitions. Then there are other inconsistencies that happen because of how the layers of technologies are stacked, the different programming languages. In particular here, the HTML and the way ARIA and other things on top of each other. And you can get quite some interesting combinations here where, for example, an inheritance model for certain roles is not well described. So for example, if I define a list item on a certain type of HTML element, does that actually work? Sorry, a list What about this, the elements below that? Do they count as list items? There are certain things like this with frames, with iframes. There are inconsistencies in the specifications themselves. Um, and then last of all, there are things where people basically interpret things differently or by mistake. And these are the kind of things that come out from that discussion. I jumped a little bit ahead, but we took on to develop so-called ACT rules, accessibility conformance testing rules. The idea is that we know people will not immediately throw away all what they developed, all their methodologies and their tools and start from scratch. And that's not what we're after at all, because it would also be a massive job to kind of try to define this uniquely right away. We were trying to look for a model for organic growth where we can get the different players together, discuss these differences, identify where these issues are. Are these things that need to be defined better in WCAG? Are these things that need to be defined better in the specifications? Are these related to accessibility support in browsers and assistive technologies, bugs in assistive technologies and browsers? Or are these things on the application level interpretation of the guidelines and requirements, right? So bringing people together and having them discuss these things, we want to try to create kind of an understanding, a common base that we can continually expand until eventually we have a much more substantial basis of coherence in how the requirements are interpreted. Now, again, let me be very clear. This includes automated tools and semi-automated tools, right? But also manual testing methodologies. This is really important. I cannot sufficiently stress that testing, automated testing is really, really important because it improves our efficiencies. But many things need to be manually tested. And I think many of you know that. So we really put that in scope as well to make sure that we can address manual testing just as well in these ACT rules. Now, one specific thing about ACT rules, and this relates to how WCAG 2 is designed, that it's usually easier to catch failures than to confirm a passing or that the requirement has been met. So a lot of these rules check for failures, and the idea is if you have enough of these rules and you fire them all and you do all these checking, you can exclude a lot of known issues, and the work remaining for evaluators to kind of validate that there hasn't been some kind of other overlay that will sneakily bring in another audio stream, for example, or somehow disturb the keyboard interaction or things like this that really cannot be done. You cannot always catch every single scenario with such rules, and you will need human validation to do that. But we hope that if we have a sufficiently large basis of tests, that we can make this evaluation much more efficient and much more reliable. So we started off, as we do in W3C, by developing a standard. That's what we do. It's called the Accessibility Conformance Test Rules Format, or Testing Rules Format. The idea here is if we want different organizations and different individuals to share how they do testing, we need a common way of writing these rules, a common way of defining how we do the testing so that we can share the different examples and discuss them, as I said, in this community and come together. So the vision was that different organizations or individual will write down their testing rules, how they test something, let's say how they test accessible name on an image or on a button or on a or how they check for the title or things like this. And they put that, and then others can comment on it. They can test it out themselves and see, does this match their own interpretation or not? So the basis really for all these discussions is having a common way of writing down these rules. So that's what we started off, and we finalized the standard over a year ago, meanwhile, as a W3C recommendation that is now being put into force. At the same time, we have a pipeline of rules that is being developed. We are very happy to have had seed funding from a European Commission funded project called the OZeWAI Tools Project. This started around 3 years ago, 2017, and that was really good because these rules were being developed at the same time as that there was the standard being developed. And there was kind of an interplay here. The more rules we kind of developed, the more we learned about how well the rules format works. We edited and went back again and had to update again all these rules that we're developing until we finalized the standard, as I said just a little bit earlier. So we have a batch of about 70 rules coming down that pipeline from that project. Many of them have already been published or in the process of being published through the so-called community group. I'll get a little bit more to these details of how the development process is happening. I want to mention in this project, we have already 3 kind of evaluation tool developers in there: Site Improve, DQ, and QualWeb. That's from the University of Lisbon. So together, they've been doing a large amount of the automated testing. We have 2 government agencies here as well, Norway and Portugal, in that project. And we're doing all this project in the open to try to get additional involvement and additional people here. So this work is happening in a so-called community group, W3C community group, which any one of you can join, regardless of W3C membership. It's an open community group. And we have additional organizations in there, such as PowerMapper, the BBC, Level Access, and others as well. We do have Australian organizations also involved here and there in the work, and would like to see more. So here, this is an open invitation, and I'll come back to that later a little bit about how you can get involved in some of this work. So what does it mean that this community group approved these 60 rules? That means that at least, I don't remember if it's 2 or 3 independent organizations, 3 actually, 3 independent approvals for this rule. So 3 different organizations have reviewed this rule and said, yes, we think this is, we agree to this interpretation of WCAG, right? So this is really good because it's a small basis. It's a small start that shows commonality among at least 3 different vendors or organizations in the community that agree to that interpretation. That doesn't mean broad consensus. It doesn't mean that most of the people in the field agree with that, but it's a start. We have to start somewhere. And only if it makes this threshold that at least 3 organizations approve it, does it get published as part of this community group. And again, community groups don't have formal standing in W3C. So this is not in any way W3C endorsed or approved, but it's a start, as I said earlier. Why that's so important? Because once we have that start and we can start seeing, okay, here are people who have approved this work, 3 different organizations. And then in addition, at least 2 organizations implement these rules. Once we have this kind of a start of a consensus, minimal approval, but also implementation of that work by 2 organizations, we can then take it to the W3C working group, which does further review and approval. There's a further discussion by a broader group, including the group that actually develops the web content accessibility guidelines, and either approves or turns down these rules. At the beginning, we had many rules that kind of had to cycle back, that did not make it. I think the first time we submitted 10 rules to W3C, and only 1 of them made it through. 9 were, I don't want to say rejected, that's a bit of a hard word, but there were comments on them. Some of them substantial in terms of interpretation, but many of them editorial, how the rule can be clear, how it can be better cross-linked to WCAG and to the techniques and things like this. So it's cycled through, and then we resubmitted, and eventually we're really building that basis. We have 12 rules that are formally published by W3C meanwhile. And I say that with great honor because I know how much hard work there has been here to actually get these 12 rules approved. It's a small set, right? But I really see it as snowballing. I know for you it's summer and you're probably not thinking about snow at all. Here actually in Vienna, has been snowing the last days. So this analogy makes sense to me. We're trying to snowball. We're starting somewhere. We first had one rule that was published, and then we had five. Now we have 12. And as I said, we have this pipeline, and we hope that we can get these rules more widely known. And we think that the more they are available, the more people will implement them and the more demand, and hopefully we can get the cycle until we really have a big set of rules. So speaking of, how do we make these rules widely available and widely known? One of the things that we try to do is to integrate it directly as part of the WCAG supporting documents. Now, the WCAG supporting documents are primarily the techniques and understanding documents. Now, if you look very, very closely on the screen here, I have a screenshot of the understanding WCAG 2.2. That's this new standard that is still coming out, hopefully mid next year, mid 2021. We expect this new W3C standard to come out. But we are already, if you look very closely in the table of content, you're going to find a new page in the understanding documentation called Understanding ACT Rules. And there are cross links. When success criteria have related rules, you will find a list of rules that relate to the success criterion, also in related techniques. So we have these cross references, and we're trying to build the rules as part of the WCAG 2 supporting documents. So hopefully, with the launch of WCAG 2.2, these rules are going to be part of that. So this is maybe a call to you if you are a developer of an automated or semi-automated testing tool, or a developer of a methodology, manual testing methodology in your organization, for example, right? To take a look at these rules, take a look at these, and maybe also take a look at the work happening in the community group. Again, I promise I'll provide more information about how to get involved, how to do that. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this integration. And one thing that I'd like to tell you is about a redesign project, which is kind of very, very parallel or separate project that we are working on at W3C as well, on redesigning these support documents, this WCAG supporting documents. So the understanding WCAG 2 documents, the techniques for WCAG 2, and also now the test rules for WCAG 2, now that they're going to be part of that. Now, as you know, these have been, or as you've just seen in the screenshot, these are using the so-called TR format, technical reports format, which is this very standard-like looking format that we use for W3C publications, like for the web content accessibility guidelines for WCAG or for other standards. And that's okay to have these formal documents or formal publications in this format. But we've heard very often when people try to use these, developers and designers who are not really as interested in the standard, they're just interested in getting the guidance on how to meet the requirements, that this format is sometimes not really the optimal format that they can use. So, so we are undertaking a project to redesign these, not necessarily the content of these, but how they're displayed and how they're interlinked. For example, to better integrate these with the WCAG 2 quick reference, which is a document that many of you might know that brings together a lot of the WCAG guidance in a way that can be customized, and also better integration with other OZeWAI resources. Let me show you some examples. So this is the understanding WCAG 2.2 the current format, right? As I said, in this TR, technical reports format, where it has a white background, a lot of front matter at the top about the abstract and the status of this document, and a table of contents which is sometimes displayed on the left depending on your magnification level, right? So the issue here right now is you have this entire list, in this case in the understanding, the entire list of success criteria, the entire table of contents, which is kind of manageable. But when you get to the techniques, you just have the whole list of techniques and you don't really know which techniques belong to which requirements, and kind of the usability of this becomes quite difficult. If we look at a specific understanding document, this is an example of understanding success criterion 2.4.3, focus order. Now you have a repetition of the success criteria at the top. Actually, above that, you kind of have some navigation. You can go to the table of contents that we just saw, which lists all the pages in the understanding. You can go to the um, level above in the hierarchy, which is the guideline called navigable, and you can read about that guideline. You can go to the previous success criteria called page title, or to the next one called link purpose. So there's a bit of a navigation at the top of the page, and then there's a heading that I had read out, and then there's a repetition of the success criterion, and then there's a lot of text, the intent, the benefits, and so on. And there's a sidebar here with the navigation and in-page navigation on the right-hand side. Now, what the redesign could look like is maybe a much more cleaned up version of that, right? So there's still at the very top a link to go to the table of contents to see all the understanding, because some people like that. There's also a link to go see all the other guidance on WCAG 2.1, all the supporting documentation. The sidebar that we've now used has information, kind of pulls out the most important information, that this is a level A success criteria. A direct link, the key terms listed in this in the success criterion. A direct link to the how to meet WCAG 2 quick reference document, right? So that you can get more easily to related techniques and things like this. There's a bit of a more comfortable styling. We still have the same text. The intent and all the other text is below. And at the bottom of that page, there's then the navigation back and forth. We're still iterating through this, so there's still discussion happening. What exactly is going to be in the sidebar and what exactly, how the navigation is exactly going to look like. But the idea is to have it more cleaned up and more integrated, more embedded with the rest of the OZeWAI website and the other supporting documents like the techniques, rather than to have it really these encapsulated islands of information, have more this kind of interlinking, so that developers that land on one set of information can more easily find their way through that set, but also to other pieces of information. I mentioned the quick reference, the WCAG 2 quick reference several times. For those of you who don't know it, I really suggest that this is something that you can that you look at. It on the left-hand side, it has the WCAG 2 contents, the table of contents, the same as what's in the formal guidelines. It also has success criteria, all the success criteria listed on the right-hand side in the main area. But along with the success criteria, it has a link to the understanding document, to the specific understanding. It also has all the techniques listed below, and you can filter if you only want to see the sufficient techniques, or also the advisory, if you want to see failures or not. And maybe in the future also, if you want to see the testing rules associated with that. But in addition to having just like this interactive navigation through WCAG and its supporting documents, it also provides a filtering tab, the quick reference. So you can select between the different versions of WCAG. There are so-called tags. You can say, okay, I'm an interaction designer, so I want to only see the success criteria and the techniques that relate to me. There are also tags for individual things like, I don't know, I'm trying to do an autocomplete or a login or, God forbid, a CAPTCHA or something. You can select that tag and you'd get the success criteria and the techniques that relate to that. So quick reference is becoming more and more kind of the central part. We're trying to put the WCAG 2 standard itself a little bit in the background. I mean, it's important to have the WCAG 2 standard as a standard because that's what gets adopted in laws and policies and contracts and so on. So it's important to have that formal document. But really, for the designers and development, we want, and the developers, we want to have these resources, this information be more usable and to integrate ACT as part of that. So I introduced two projects. One is the Redesigned Project, where we're trying to redesign the supporting documents. But the reason why I was pointing that out is because with that redesign, we also hope to bring in the accessibility conformance testing rules, which was really the main point of my presentation today, to show to you the accessibility conformance testing work here, how important it is to harmonize the understanding of WCAG, but at the same time, how important it is to accelerate the implementation and a common understanding. So I really want to invite you here to get involved in this work on ACT, on accessibility conformance testing, and there are many, many ways in which you can get involved. The most basic, and yes, I say that very often, but many people forget that just reading that information and maybe providing the one or the other comment. Hey, I found this bug here, or hey, I actually disagree with this, or that's not really my interpretation, or here's another test case that you can think of. You can do very lightweight reading and providing comments, providing reviews, implementing these rules. So if you like them, if you feel, this is interesting, you can start implementing. And this is something that you can do pretty much offline and for yourself. It's going to be beneficial for you, hopefully, but also beneficial to the community. And we can all work more together on this. Now, the next level, if you want to get more involved and be more active, I had mentioned to you the accessibility conformance testing, ACT rules community group. Now, community groups in W3C are open to anyone to participate. So you're welcome to join this group and you can then discuss. Everything is happening on GitHub. We try to have as many open discussions as possible. We specifically have two meeting times. We have one meeting time in the morning European time, which is the afternoon in Australia. It's specifically so that we can have involvement from Southeast Asia and Australia, right? We did that specifically. So here, really extending that invitation so that you can participate in this work. And we have one appointment in the afternoon European time, which is more suitable for the Americas and the other parts of the world. So this is always once a month in the morning and once a month in the afternoon. So there would be once a month this meeting. But actually, as I said, a lot of the work is happening asynchronously on GitHub. You can come in and discuss these rules, propose new rules that you have, shake them out and so on. There's a W3C task force. That's the next level of involvement. A task force called ACT Rules Task Force, what a surprise, which is a subgroup of the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group. Now, that's the working group that actually publishes WCAG and that has the final say. That's the group that actually publishes these rules. But the actual work of reviewing, kind of authoritative review, final review, has been delegated to the task force. So a lot of the first level review happens in the task force. And then once things manage all these levels of development, at the very end, it's brought to the main working group for final approval and publication. And so this is another group where some of you might already be involved in, but might want to be specifically more involved in on the rules aspect. But that group really has a lot on its plate, including WCAG 2.2 itself and WCAG 3 and many other things that it's working on. In the task force, we focus only on the review of these rules. So with this, I'd like to close and thank you. It's unfortunate that I could not be with you in person for obvious reasons, but we hope that 2020 is soon over and in 2021 we can be traveling more. All the information I presented here and links to ACT and our latest publications and so on is available on our website, w3.org/WAI for Web Accessibility Initiative. So w3.org/WAI, you can find all this information, or contact me personally, Shadi Abou-Zahra. You can contact me on Twitter at SABOUZAH, or by email Shadi, SHADI, at w3.org. And I look forward to hearing with you from you, and have a lovely rest of your conference. Thank you very much.